Thanks, Daniela. Time now for the headliner, brought to you by Miller Lite. And let's bring in the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings, Jeff Blashill. Jeff, thanks for joining us. Really glad you could make some time and join us today on the headliner. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Art. Did you paint that room yourself?
As a matter of fact, I sort of did. As you can tell, it's kind of a two-color thing. Well, you know me, Jeff. I think if there's one thing, I have a real flair for fashion and for color. So I thank you for complimenting me.
I've always thought that about you, Art.
Jeff, you're soon to be a Hall of Famer. Congratulations on being elected to the Ferris State Hall of Fame. And I know through your life, whether it's your father, a former Detroit police officer, moved the family up to the UP to become a professor, and a couple of youth coaches that you had in the UP that were instrumental in your life. But I like Bob Daniels. He's the head coach at Ferris State, longtime head coach. He was your coach. Can you talk about your relationship with Bob Daniels and what he's meant to you?
Well, Bob had a huge impact on my life, and I was inducted into the Ferris Hall of Fame for my post playing career. Certainly not my playing career during my time at Ferris. I was a below average goalie there, I don't know that I get going in coaching, or that I certainly get the foundation in coaching if I hadn't have played for Bob Daniels. And it's really given me some time this NHL pause in our season to think about it. And my junior and senior year at Ferris, I played a lot my first 2 years, and I lost my job my junior year. And so I sat on the bench a little bit my junior and most of my senior year. And Bob always made me feel important. And I think it was a good kind of self-reflection for me as a coach. It's easy to forget the guys that aren't necessarily out there helping you win every single shift and every single night, but they do have importance to the team. And Bob always made me feel important. He would come ask me questions on the bench, and he probably got me invigorated into the thought of coaching. And he actually came to me my senior year during one of the practices and asked if I'd ever thought about getting into coaching. And at that point, I had it. Prior to that, I had always thought of maybe going to law school, maybe doing something in the world of finance, maybe going to trying to get into the FBI. And he's really the one that probably helped ignite my coaching career. And then the first 4 years of my coaching career were spent under Bob Daniels, and it certainly learned a great foundation of how to teach, how to treat people, the smarts of hockey. He was excellent at it. And Drew Famulak, I was with for all 4 of those years too. He's still an assistant there. Drew had a big impact. And so, I remember one of my first coaching jobs, I was the 4th assistant. Jamie Russell was an assistant coach there as well. And I was the eye in the sky, and I'd come down between periods. And I remember coming down at Northern Michigan and them asking me, what I saw. And boy, I couldn't say anything. I didn't know what I saw. Everything seemed to happen so fast. And they were talking about this adjustment and that adjustment. And I was really green. And then the next year I got the job full time, and Bob allowed me a lot of responsibility, allowed me a lot of recruiting responsibility. So I owe a ton in my life to Bob. He's a great friend of mine, a great person, as somebody that I spend a lot of time with to this day.
Last week we had Justin Abdicator on the headliner, and he was talking about eventually, if the sport does get back, the season is put off pause, that he thinks it's going to take a legitimate month to get into shape to come back and play those games. The Red Wings only have 11 games left. I mean, are you of the same ilk? Do you think it's going to take a training camp of 3 or 4 weeks, just because you don't want to risk injury to these guys?
Well, certainly it's the longest they being the players usually go without skating. Most players now skate all summer long. To be honest with you, the days of waiting till August and getting in shape are long gone. Guys are working on their skill development throughout the course of the summer. So, most times players don't go this long without skating. So, there certainly needs to be a ramp up period of time. Now, what does that look like is what I'll be interested to see. Is there a period of time where they're able to get back in buildings and start weight training and getting on the ice and doing some skating on their own, and then that leads to some type of camp, and then that leads to going and playing real games? what does that look like? Is it all team centered where you start right away and it's 4 weeks with just the team? Boy, that's a long time to just do that. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Obviously, we don't know any of that yet. What we'll do as a staff is try to maximize our opportunity and the games for this year for us. We've already figured out where we're going to end up in the standings, but they certainly can mean something moving forwards towards next year, whether it's individual skill development or if it's making sure that we're building into a team identity to prepare for next year. And that's the way we treat it if we were told to come back and we're going to have a camp and we're going to play. That's going to be an important part for next season for us.
Do you try to keep in contact with the players, or are you allowed to? Have you tried to make sure that they're doing everything correctly, or maybe the training staff, talking to Steve a little bit, just so everybody is still pretty much engaged, even though everybody is at home?
Yeah, we have. I've talked to almost every one of our players, and kind of went through a number of different items and talked to them about what their plan is for this summer and those types of things. And I know our strength coach is doing the same thing, and our training staff is doing the same thing, and I believe Steve Yzerman is doing the same thing. So we're trying to get contact with the players, make sure we stay in touch. I ask them what they hear from the NHLPA. I tell them any information that I might have, and again, my biggest message is. We're training to be a better hockey team a year from now. And if it ends up where we don't come back this summer, then we got to train to be a better hockey team next year. If it ends up where we do come back this summer, then we're training to be a better hockey team next year, both individually and collectively. And that's what we're going to look at this as. So, the players seem to be all in different kind of spots. Some guys have more access to weights and some guys have to be really creative. I think in the end, this is where inner drive plays a big factor in success. Like if you have that great inner drive, you're going to find a way to be useful during this time. And if you don't, you'll probably find excuses to not be useful. So we got to make sure and rely upon the inner drive of our players and the character of our group.
Now, there's always been, you've always been good with young players. Every place that you've won, you won a Calder Cup in Grand Rapids. You've always won championships. You took a Western Michigan program that was a CCHA, and I don't want to be harsh, but let's say a bottom echelon team and elevated them to a playoff team in 1 year. What is the secret to motivating young players?
Art, to be honest with you, I don't think it's different between young players and guys with experience. Either way, our job is to show them when they're on the path to greatness and when they're not, and you set up standards that they're to meet, and when they don't meet it, you have consequences, and generally immediate consequences are the best way to change habits, just like in parenting. So I don't think it matters whether you're a younger player or an older player. Our number one job as coaches is people managers, and that's what we do is we manage people. And so communication becomes a huge factor in that. Again, making sure that they know when they're doing it right and when they're not doing it right. And we got to tell them both ways. And then they got to self-reflect and make the necessary adjustments. And when you do that as a group, you end up maximizing each guy, and they end up becoming the very best player they can become, which also leads you to become the very best team you can become.
I would imagine you have to be encouraged. I mean, obviously the record is where nobody wants it is, but the influx of talent that the Red Wings have, of young talent, and the way some of the guys, like whether it's Mo Sider or Joe Veleno finally, catching it in Grand Rapids, Michael Rasmussen learning center, that the future does look bright because these young players that have entered the system within the last 3 or 4 years are starting to mature and look like they're on the cusp of being in the NHL.
Well, I think it started a number of years ago where, we stopped trading away picks to try to make runs in the playoffs. And we started, for lack of a better word, Ken started hoarding or collecting as many draft picks as he can. And then we traded away real NHL players for future draft picks. And when you do that, sometimes it results in a season like we've had where it was painful at times to go through, but it also is part of the bigger plan to try to reignite the franchise with a number of young players. And what it comes down to in the end is how good those young players are. Are they good? Are they great? Are they elite? How quickly can they help impact your organization? And there's a process, there's a developmental process that goes with that, and you can't force the timeline. It's kind of like the timeline we're living in now. The virus dictates the timeline. We don't, and it's the same thing in player development. You can't force the timeline. So, I hope they all become elite, and I hope they do it tomorrow. But that's probably not the reality. What I think, as I look at the pool of players that we have, of young players, I think it's as good as we've had since I've been in the organization in terms of prospects, certainly on defense. I think there's a number of guys that have a chance to be good NHL players, and then can one or two of them become great NHL players. That puts you way ahead as an organization. So it's a patient process. I know Steve's talked about the need for patience, and that's the reality. And it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard as a hockey team. It's hard as a head coach, and it's hard for the fan base. But there are no shortcuts to success in life, and there are no shortcuts to success in this league.
Jeff, people always ask me, your relationship with Steve Yzerman is pretty special. He's come out several times and said that you're both on the same page. You understand where you're at. Can you elaborate a little bit on, because you didn't know Steve real well until he got here, but this seems to be a nice little relationship is developing where, as I said, you're both on the same page. You both have an understanding.
I didn't know Steve well, no, certainly not in this context, until he arrived here as the GM. I knew him. We were friendly, but I didn't really know him. And until you work for somebody, I don't think you're really doing. You learn as you move through different trials and tribulations together. And the one thing with Steve is he's very honest, and I know where I stand at all times. I try to be very honest with him. I try to keep him in the loop of any of the decisions that I'm making, to make sure the communication is really clear. Again, part of our job as NHL head coaches to make sure that you communicate up as well as communicate down. And so I think our communication's been good. Again, I got a lot of respect for Steve. He can give lots of insight. He's been through a lot of things as an NHL player and as an NHL GM, and I would be crazy not to try to glean that information from him. And that's the way I look at it. I want to gather as much information from as many people's experiences, and certainly his experiences are unique. He's been in this spot that we're in right now, and I love to hear some of his thoughts on that, and that helps me be better informed and allows me to make the best decision possible. So I've really enjoyed working for Steve. He's, as I said, real honest, and I think we know where each other stand.
Jeff, I know we're running out of time, but I got to tell you real quick. People always ask me, wow, Jeff Blashill, I know you see him all the time. Seems like a real nice guy. And I said, well, my Jeff Blashill story is when you were at Western Michigan, I was doing a lot of CCHA games for Comcast, and you let me be like, I was the rinkside reporter, be on your bench for the first and third period of every Western game that we did. And, you were always nice and gracious with your time, as I said. And people said, what can you tell us about Jeff Blashill? I said, when he's behind that bench, he is one, he's like Shaft. He's one bad, you are intense back there. You have a job to do, and your focus, it wasn't that I guess I was surprised, but you're completely different behind the bench than you are, I guess, outside of the rink.
Well, I think, some of that's perspective, Art, and just, again, when we're doing our job, we're trying to do it to the best of our ability. And when you're leading a group, you don't really have time to worry about feelings per se, and you make decisions and you lead. But that doesn't also mean that we have a lot of communication after. That's super important. And beyond all that, I'm a hockey coach. It's a great profession. But I better be judged in life as more than a hockey coach. And I think that the chance to have an impact on people is huge. And I hope I'm always known for the impact I have on people in a positive manner.
Jeff Blashill, head coach of the Detroit Red Wings. Also, congratulations again on being elected to the Hall of Fame, or being named as a member of the Hall of Fame of Ferris State. Thanks for joining us on the Headliner, Jeff. I always appreciate it. Sometimes I know I have a tendency to maybe screw around too much with you, but you've always been there for me throughout the years, and I can't thank you enough. Thanks again, Jeff.
Absolutely, Art. Thank you.
All right, there you have it. That is the Headliner, brought to you by Miller Lite, the original light beer with great taste and only 96 calories, available for delivery. Daniela, what can I say? You can tell. Jeff Blashill is one of my favorites. I am not objective. I really like the guy.